I am Michele, he is Riccardo.
Hi.
We are both from Ideato, as you may guess. And in Ideato we work in a cross-functional team. We are developers, UX designers, UX expert, sysops guys, whatever. And obviously
Dancer.
no dancer,
No.
no. I mean in the free time, but it doesn't count, I guess. Yeah, by the way, we work in a heterogeneous environment, so we really like the approach behind Vagrant, which is also known as the Tao of Vagrant. There is a nice blog post, which I invite you to read if you haven't already done it. Basically, what it says, well, if you want to start a new project, you just clone your repository and Vagrant app, and you're done. You get a new fully configured virtual machine with all your projects set up, all the dependencies installed, and nothing more. You can just start working. Now, let me ask a question. How many of you use Vagrant? Okay, so you probably know that, well, it's not totally true. Okay, it's not that simple sometimes. So basically, this talk is about sharing some of the tips we found on the internet, we learned by trying, and yeah, it's just as simple as that. I don't expect that everything that worked for us will work for you, but just think about it and try it. Okay, basically this talk is divided in 4 parts. In the first one, we start with some easy tips about Vagrant file configuration for portability. Then we'll dive into VM virtual machine performance. After that, we'll spend a few words on app configuration tips, okay, to make easy working with your PHP application inside the virtual machine. And in the last part, I'd like to cover a bit 2 topics, provisioning and packaging your own virtual machine. So, Riccardo?
Okay. Okay, let's start to talk about portable Vagrant configuration. With the portable configuration, every member of your team can clone a project, run Vagrant app, and just work. When you create a Vagrant file with the init command, the default name of the box inside the Vagrant file is base. For portability reason, you should avoid to use these local names. Instead, it's better to use the names provided, for example, by HashiCorp, like HashiCorp Precise64, or specify a public URL. In both cases, Vagrant, when you run Vagrant app, if the box is not added to your local machine, Vagrant, download it and run the provision. Always for portability reason, you should avoid to use absolute path in your Vagrant configuration. For example, this configuration is wrong because when someone else runs Vagrant app and Vagrant doesn't find this path, Vagrant doesn't work. It's better to use relative path and make your configuration more portable. Usually, the Vagrant file is a committed file. You commit Vagrant file in your repository and share with your teammate. So my suggestion is to move specific host machine configuration outside from Vagrant file and put it in an external file that you have to exclude from the repository. For example, you can use a YAML file like this, where you can specify the memory size that you want to assign to your guest machine, the number of the CPU, or the IP address for creating a private network. Then include the file inside the Vagrant configuration and use the values imported in the provider section. As a rule of thumb, you could assign the half of the CPUs and a quarter of memory based on your local host machine. Okay, if in your machine you have installed both VirtualBox and VMware, but when you run Vagrant app, Vagrant run with VMware because VMware is more efficient. But if you want to use VirtualBox, you can do this in this way. Use the env array and specify the name of the provider. In this case, VirtualBox. Project folders organization. We mainly suggest two ways for organizing your project when you use Vagrant. The first, you have a project directory, a Vagrant file in the root of the project directory, another directory that contains, for example, all project or source code, and a directory that contains all Vagrant stuff. Vagrant should share only the project directory. This other way is useful when you have a project, for example, that contains different sub-projects, and each of this sub-project is a different Git repository. In this case, you should create another repository for contain all the Vagrant stuff, put the Vagrant file in this repository, and the Vagrant file share the directory that contains all sub-project. Host Updater is a very cool plugin for automatically add hosts in your host machine and make your configuration more portable. When you use a plugin, a pattern that we use is to check in the Vagrant file if the plugin is installed, and then use the plugin. In this case, Host Updater write host1.hello in your host machine, on your host file, sorry.
Okay, makes sense to you? Yeah.
You said you can commit the Vagrant file to Git.
Yeah.
But before you said that in a multi-project environment,
Yeah.
the Vagrant file is one,
Yeah.
and the Git root is the project root you have.
Yeah. Basically, the idea behind this setup is you create a separate Git repository, Git or whatever repository for the machine configuration, and then you share a single virtual machine between several
projects
related in some way project. Okay?
So the Git root is always the project view.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So you get a mug. Thank you for the question.
You win.
Okay, and I got a mug because I asked it. It makes sense. So
Okay.
only two left. Okay, let's talk about VM performance. It's quite good to have a fully configure virtual machine, but I guess you all know that sometimes running tests can become really, really, really slow. So in this section, we want to share some, thank you, some of the tips we tried on our project to mitigate this problem, let's say. The first one, which provider is the better, VirtualBox or VMware? Again, there is a quite good post by Michele, which is the creator of Vagrant, where he compares the performance of different file systems on different providers. And we try to do the same in our project, because I don't care if on Michele machine things got better. It needs to get better in my project. And a 22 minute build on VirtualBox becomes a 15 minutes build on VMware, which means that basically you gain 30% performance improvement by just switching provider. and doing nothing else. So my suggestion is, not surprisingly, use VMware if you can. But it will cost you a few bucks because you need a license for VMware Fusion or whatever, plus a license for a Vagrant plugin which is able to run VMware as a provider, which in total will cost you $150, but in my opinion is worth the money because you will save time. Again, use NFS if you can because it performs better than native shared folders. And if you don't or can't use VMware and you are stuck on VirtualBox, just install the VBGuest plugin, which is in charge of checking if the VirtualBox guest additions are updated inside the virtual machine, and if not, it will update it for you. You don't have to do nothing again. It's all automatic. Okay. In general, on virtual machine, input-output writing on the file system is the real bottleneck. And our common activity, like loading web pages and running test suite, are in particular red-heavy activity. In general, is a good tip trying to move all the input-output outside the shared folders. And again, we tried to run some tests. We took 3 of our projects with 3 different sizes. Each one was composed by several kind of tests, unit, functional, and integration tests. And the smaller build run is in 25 seconds, the medium one in 2 minutes, and the large one in 20 minutes. Okay, then we tried to move logs and cache files out of the shared folder. Here is an example of how to do it in Symfony 2. How many of you use Symfony 2 for developing? Okay, not that much actually. Okay, it's not really important. Just you need to remember that /dev/shm is the shared memory, which means that all the file, all the stuff you put here goes in RAM. In this way, we are moving basically the cache directory and the log directory in the RAM. By doing this, we experienced a performance improvement from 13 to 16%. Again, is not bad in my opinion. Another tip is try to increase the real path cache, which is a setting you can tweak on the PHP in a configuration file. It's quite effective if you use a framework which is composed by a lot of files, like Symfony 2, let's say. By doing this, again, we experienced a performance improvement about 7%. I just want to mention it's not totally related to virtual machine because it's a good advice in general. If you can, in particular for your integration and functional test, if you can move your database on RAM, things again will get better. So if you use, for instance, SQLite in your tests, you just can move it again on /dev/shm and you're done. Okay. Questions so far? Yeah.
Do you have any experience with parallels?
With parallels? No, sorry, but no. Yeah. We just tried so far VMware and VirtualBox. So I don't have information about that. Okay. Another quite, yes, you get a mic. How many left? Two.
One now. It's not a smart question, dude.
Yeah, let's talk about it later. Okay, another quite useful plugin is Vagrant Cacher, which basically tries to save you sometimes when downloading packages from the internet. Okay, let's say you are installing a LAMP machine, you will need Apache, PHP, MySQL, and so on. And if you are creating a similar virtual machine, basically the packages you are going to download are less or more the same. So if you're using a local cache, you will gain the benefit of not downloading it again and again and again and again every time you create a new virtual machine. The configuration is pretty straightforward. Again, you have just to specify the scope of the cache. You have two values here. Box means that the cache is shared between all the machines created from the same base box. Let's say HashiCorp Precis 64. Okay. The other possible value is machine, which means that the cache is specific for the given machine. And when you Vagrant up or Vagrant provision the machine, basically the cache directory will be copied inside the virtual machine. And so you don't need, again, to download it from the net. And we try to provision several machines with some base packages, like Git, PHP, Apache, MySQL, and we notice a difference of 30% performance improvement from the second and later provision, which I guess it's really dependent on how many packages are you going to download. Okay, the more packages you download, the better it gets. Sorry. Okay, last tip about performance. If you use NFS, you can try to use cache file SD, which is a small package you can install on the virtual machine. Here is a Ansible snippet, but actually it's not really important. You can install it with via apt, okay? And you just need to put this configuration line on the config file and start the service. Again, it will create a cache directory inside the virtual machine, and yeah, performance should be better, as I'll show you in a brief moment. Then you have to specify some mount options on the shared folders. Again, you have to specify you are on NFS. And we got a strange result in this case, because in one case, the smaller build performed worse, which was a bit strange. The medium one performs better, plus 10%, and the large one basically didn't have any kind of improvement. So my suggestion is, I don't know, try and see if it gets better or worse.
Okay. This section is about common tasks for PHP projects. So the first is how to access to MySQL. Mainly, there are two ways to access to MySQL: from your host machine through the guest machine, remote connections, or directly from your guest machine. Okay. The first way, for remote connection, you have simply to enable create a MySQL user that can connect from all hosts and edit the MySQL configuration file, replacing the bind address value from localhost IP to 0000 to unlock a remote connection, and done. The second way is the connection directly on your guest machine. You can do this simply install, for example, phpMyAdmin, or if you prefer, for example, to use adminer, you can clone this and compile, and works. Given that Vagrant, when you access to Vagrant with the Vagrant SSH, Vagrant is the default user of your shell. So our suggestion is to set Vagrant as the user of your web server, and this solves a lot of problems with permission in shared folders. Or you can changing the permission, assign the owner, the group, and the level of the permission in your shared folder in this way. But this configuration works only if you use basic shared folder, not, for example, NFS. Vagrant use host machine SSH case only if you enable this with forward agent. Plus, you have to check the SSH, the host machine SSH config file and set forward agent to yes. Forward agent is useful, for example, when you want to clone a private repository from the guest machine, or for example, run a deploy from the guest machine. Provisioning.
Okay, thank you. Last section. Okay, we are running out of time, so let's spend a few words on provisioning. Basically, the question I'd like to ask is, it's useful to use phansilbe or puphet or the project like phansilbe, which are out there. I mean, they are quite good project because they provide you a nice interface. I don't know how many of you have tried to use it. You just need to check some options, which version of PHP I want, which version of Apache, and I click a button, I got a zip file, I download it, I have Vagrant app, and I don't need to choose or configure anything more. Okay, so basically they are a quick and easy way to start, and they provide a good range of options, which is both good and bad in my opinion, because maybe you don't need so much choice, and it can be confusing sometimes. All platforms are not supported. Let's say today, if you want to install a PHP 5.3 machine because you have a legacy project, well, it's not that simple to do it. And still, they have a lot of good ideas you can steal from it. And here's an example of a Vagrant file snippet generated from Ansible. I'd like you to focus your attention here. Basically, it works in a quite simple way. If Ansible is installed on the host machine, it will be run, or otherwise it will be run a shell script. Okay. Now my question is, can you assume that everyone in your team have the same version of the provision tool installed on the host machine? I don't know, you cannot be sure because maybe one have installed a newer version and things started not working anymore. And again, in this way, we are demanding to Vagrant the task of invoking the provision tool, which is, again is fine, but remember that the provision tool is a moving part. So if you are going to update it, be careful because, again, things might stop working or not working as expected. My suggestion in this case is try to create Vagrant independent provision script because, again, it's pretty straightforward. You just need 2 steps. In the first one, you use a bootstrap script which installs the basic packages and the provision tool, and in the second one you just invoke the provision tool and you're done. In this way, basically you are not dependent from Vagrant for this task anymore. And again, my suggestion is, on the long run, just try to use phansilbe or whatever, but in the long run try to create your own template because it will be a more durable and robust solution, in my opinion. Like we did, if you want to check it out, is a Git repository with some default configuration. Okay, in this way you're in control of the provisioning command, and again, if you want, you can perform additional checks on the host machine, which is not bad in my opinion. Okay, last step, distributing virtual machine among your team member. One thing that struck me was that provisioning doesn't create a mutable machine by default magically. Okay, so every time you Vagrant app, you are creating a new machine. Actually, the package underneath maybe got updated, so you got a different version of the virtual machine. Okay, so again, things may stop working or not working as expected. So how to deal with it? Well, first way, live on the edge and fix the provision script as it broke. well, maybe it's a bit on the edge. Or at least you can try to use stable package repositories. Let's say you don't want PHP to got upgraded over than, I don't know, PHP 5.4, okay? Just look for a repository which is stable and use it. And again, my suggestion is try to create and distribute your own virtual machine. Again, there is a quite good presentation about this pattern. Basically, it's quite simple. After you provision the machine, okay, when you are quite sure that configuration won't change that much, you can try to create your own box with Vagrant package, and you can publish it somewhere on the internet. Just it needs to be accessible in some way by your own teammates. And in the Vagrant file, you just specify the URL of your box. So when one of your teammates start working on the project, it doesn't need to reprovision a new virtual machine. It will download a virtual machine which is already totally configured. Again, things will be more stable. You will get less surprises. Okay, so basically we are done.
Yes. Almost done. In the last 2 years in Ideato, we have introduced Vagrant for almost all our projects. We have found problems, but the time invested on implementing the tips before mentioned is repaid every time a new guys, a new person want to start to work on a project. The talk is finished. Please give us the feedback, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.